If your instinct in January is to jump right to a strict diet or reset, I want to offer you a different perspective. Restriction isn't a hormone solution. It is actually one of the fastest ways to throw your hormones out of balance. Your body does not heal through pressure. It heals through nourishment, rhythm, routine, and regulation. So if you're waking up tired, you're feeling inflamed, you're craving more structure, or noticing mood swings, your hormones aren't asking you to tighten things up. They're asking you to actually support them. Today, I'm going to break down how to reset your hormones naturally without dieting, deprivation, or extreme protocols. You'll learn what your hormones actually need, why restriction backfires, and the simple habits that create safety and stability inside your body. And by the way, if you're new here, hi, I'm Janell Yule. Welcome. This is the Transformation Show where we focus on restoring your health by working with your hormones instead of fighting against them. My goal is always for you to leave here feeling grounded, supported, and more in tune with your body. So let's dive in. What do your hormones actually need? Well, a big one, and you've heard me talk about this before, and I will continue to talk about it because it is a foundational thing, is stable blood sugar. Skipping meals, fasting too long, or not eating enough macronutrients like protein and then getting micronutrients like vitamins and minerals from things like fruits and vegetables and fiber will be a recipe for disaster. The other thing that your hormones really, really like is they like consistent meals. So, as much as possible, trying to time your meals consistently each day. Now, there's a caveat to this, and that caveat is that it will shift and change with the seasons. So, right now, we have less light, although the days are getting longer again, and more darkness. And so we actually want to change our feeding window to mimic the season that we are in. When we fast forward to summertime, we are going to probably widen that feeding window because we have a lot more light. We're also probably a lot more active. And so that consistent mealtime also means the cadence of your meals throughout the day. Whereas if you are eating breakfast and then you're not eating again for 6, 7 hours because you're skipping lunch, your hormones don't love that at all. I touched on this just a bit when I talked about blood sugar, but making sure you're eating enough protein. And enough protein is going to be different for many individuals. A good starting place for most women is going to be roughly that 100 grams. That's a starting place. That isn't an ending place for most of the women that I work with. And then we need minerals. And so we need to be using high quality salt on our food, Celtic sea salt, Himalayan pink sea salt. We probably need electrolytes. I see so many electrolyte imbalances or mineral imbalances when I'm doing hair tissue mineral analysis testing. I'm seeing low potassium. I'm seeing people burn through sodium. And so this is where electrolytes come into play. We can't just hydrate. We actually need to provide our body minerals. That's also going to impact our energy and it's also going to impact our digestion. The next point is predictable sleep. And so, again, trying to go to bed roughly at the same time each night and then getting up roughly at the same time each morning. Our hormones really, really like that. Now, obviously, this is not going to be perfect. And on the weekends, you may stay up a little bit later. You may sleep in a little bit later, but roughly within that hour-ish of when you typically go to bed and when you typically wake up is what you're going to want to stick with. And I'm going to leave you, or I'm also going to share this with you, is it also matters when you sleep. So each hour of sleep before midnight is worth 2 hours of sleep to your adrenal glands. And your adrenal glands are those little glands that sit on top of your kidneys that secrete your stress hormone cortisol. They also secrete norepinephrine, adrenaline. And so it's really important that they feel supported. Okay. So it matters if you're sleeping 10 to 6, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. versus if you are sleeping midnight to 8 a.m. Okay. And your hormones also like movement. Movement is medicine. And they often, depending on the season you're in, depending on your hormonal status, they often like gentle movement. And they also really like movement after meals. So, one of the things that you can get in the habit of doing is even 5 minutes 10 minutes of walking after meals will really help to support your blood sugar and support the hormonal response from anything that you are eating. Super, super, I will say simple, not always easy. And again, we're not looking for perfection here. So, for example, I ate lunch just a little while ago, and my walk or movement is going to happen in a little bit based on my schedule. So it's not always perfect. Remember, progress, not perfection. All right, so why does restriction actually backfire on us? And so the big one has to do with that hormone that the adrenal glands secrete, which is cortisol. And so when our body is feeling like it's under stress, so stressors can be fasting too long, stressors can be skipping meals, stressors can be under eating, and we'll get to that in just a moment, and as it relates to the thyroid. And stressors can be doing too much. So, if you remember, I talked about this, I believe, on last week's episode about the nervous system too much, too fast, too soon, not enough. Okay. So, cortisol is going to rise in that response. And also, when we're in this restrictive mode, our brain is actually viewing that as a threat to our survival. And then what happens is it has a trickle down effect. And what your body will do is it will steal precursor hormones to make cortisol because your body's number one over all else, over your sex drive, over your wanting to lose weight, over digestion, over all else. Your body's number one goal for you is to keep you alive, survival over all else. So then it steals precursor hormones for sex hormones like progesterone. And again, depending on where you are at in your hormonal status, that can impact a lot of things. It can impact your mood, it can impact your sleep. Progesterone is that calming hormone. Okay. And then what happens from a metabolic standpoint is when you are under eating, when you are restricting, and I want to be really clear here because yes, weight loss requires a calorie deficit. And it requires a calorie deficit in a way that feels like your body can handle it and it's sustainable. It does not respond well to dramatic calorie restriction and over exercising, etc. Because what will happen over time, now initially that may work. Initially, that may be just fine. But what will happen over time is your thyroid will put on what I call the metabolic brake. And this is why it is so important. And I will do a future episode on thyroid health and having a full thyroid panel done because you can get so much information from a full thyroid panel. Testing your TSH basically does nothing. Okay. It only tells you what your pituitary gland is doing to signal to your thyroid. And when I see there's something called reverse T3. When I see that high, I know that the body has been under chronic stress and the thyroid is putting on that metabolic brake for that person. And often that woman is experiencing weight loss resistance. Okay. Here's what also will happen: increased cravings, especially if you are like, I'm going to eat a small breakfast, I'm going to eat a small lunch, and it's like restrict, restrict, restrict. By afternoon and evening, you can't stop eating. And you're also craving things because our body needs nutrition. And there is a way for you to create the hormonal response that you desire. And specifically, if that is weight loss, there's a way for you to do that while also feeling satiated. And that is really, really key. The next thing is you have less digestive capacity when you are in a stress state. Because if you remember what I said when we talked about cortisol, is your body's number one thing is to keep you alive and survival. And so it's going to shunt everything away from digestion, and you likely will be experiencing more bloating, more gas, maybe constipation, maybe acid reflux, like these digestive symptoms that we can get because your body's like, we don't have time to digest this food. We're too busy running from the tiger because of whatever perceived stress it is under. And it's usually not just what's happening with our nutrition and our exercise, it's also what is happening in our life. Okay. And the last thing why restriction can backfire is because it can be anxiety producing. It can be very dysregulating. It feels like we're in this fight, this flight. And it's like there's this like chaotic energy around it because oftentimes when we put ourselves in this mode or when we start to move back into this pattern, because likely it is a learned habit and a learned pattern, and it is not the first time that we have found ourselves here, it becomes very dysregulating for your nervous system. Like it maybe feels familiar, but it's not comfortable. Okay. So those two things are not the same thing. So if this has been a pattern for you, especially as the calendar turns, it's like, okay, I got to restrict, I got to get ready for a trip or whatever it is. We're often putting a lot of pressure and timelines on this, and that can be producing more anxiety. Now, there's also physiological reasons why anxiety could be showing up as well. I talked about progesterone. I talked about blood sugar balance. If you are skipping breakfast and drinking coffee, that is a recipe for anxiety. Okay. So now, how do we reset in a very supportive and nourishing way? Well, first, you need to eat and not just eat anything, but you need to eat at least 30 grams of protein within 30 to 60 minutes of waking. And if you're waking up without an appetite, that's something that you want to work towards. Is when you're waking up without an appetite, it is a clear signal that your cortisol is high. Okay. And so what we want to do is we want to eat something that's very protein based, very like protein, healthy fat, a dense meal, and that's going to help stabilize your blood sugar for the rest of the day and prevent those afternoon and evening cravings. You want to build meals around protein, color, fiber. So it's not just about the protein, it's also about the micronutrients. It's also about fiber. Protein has had its moment, right? You can make cottage cheese out of everything. And I know a lot of times we are missing that fiber piece. And that fiber piece is coming from fruits, vegetables, beans, legumes, and also eating for me, gluten-free grains be really where I would focus when it comes to fiber. And so making sure that you're also eating within the season, like this time of year, January, it's cold. So it's like warming foods, squashes, root vegetables. And when it comes to color, really look at the plate that you're building and think about it from a nutrition standpoint. I've said for years, be a nutrition seeker versus a calorie counter. Because when you're adding more nutrition in, not always, but typically the calories will take care of themselves because you're actually getting nutrition from the calories that you're eating. So when you're building your plate, can you have three different colors? Can you have an orange? Can you have a green? Can you have a red or a purple or even a white? Because things like cauliflower are white, or jicama or things like that. So can you have at least three colors on your plate? And then can your movement be restorative? Can you walk more? If you're not moving, if you're not consistent with your movement, start with walking. Instead of jolting your system to really high intense movement or really intense workouts, walk more. Walk more. And then along with that, coupled with that, if you are still menstruating, are you paying attention to your menstrual cycle in relationship to your movement? Now, I will say that I am a big proponent of listen to your body. And sometimes, I'm not saying don't do anything when you are late luteal phase into your period. I'm saying listen to your body. And so noticing, am I at a phase in my cycle where my body actually wants more gentle movement? It wants yoga, it wants walking, versus am I in a place in my cycle where I'm in my follicular phase, I'm at ovulation and I can really push the weights. And so also again, and if you're not menstruating, again, listening to your body when you have a lot of demands on your time, on your energy, with your schedule, adding more stress from really intense workouts, maybe not the best idea. And also adjusting your training for the time of year. The intensity that I do for my workouts in the summer is different than the intensity that I do in the winter. This is a time of more slowing down, more restorative, more, and I'm not saying I don't do intense workouts. It just likely looks different. And then lastly, supporting your gut and detox pathways. And one of the most important ways that you can support your digestion is by slowing down when you are eating and really truly eating in a relaxed state, not standing at the counter, not driving in your car, not watching the news, not having an intense conversation. And again, we're not about perfection, but we're about progress. And really truly being grateful for your food, chewing your food, being relaxed. And if you can give yourself that space, you will notice that your digestion changes. I promise you, it changes. And this is something that you don't need another supplement. You don't need a protocol for this. This is really truly about tuning into your body and really, again, chewing your food thoroughly. And this is also where I like to bring in something like castor oil packs to support your liver. And this can really put your nervous system also in a very relaxed state as well. So you're kind of, it's like a two for one, as I call it, or a twofer. So from the lens of the body, from a somatic lens, restriction will tighten the body, nourishment softens it. And this is the state where your hormones will recalibrate. This is the state where you will start to notice the difference. So, what I would encourage you to try this week is one hormone supported breakfast. My favorite hormone supporting breakfast: egg bites, some ground turkey breakfast sausage, and some roasted veggies. I typically tend to go with something like green beans or carrots or squash or Brussels sprouts, something along those lines. It's very nutrient dense and it's warm and it's protein dense. Maybe swapping one of your high intensity workouts for a walk, really truly listening to your body and understanding what does your body need instead of thinking that it's more, more, more. More is not always better. Oftentimes less actually becomes more, especially when it comes to our hormones in midlife. Commit to a consistent bedtime. If it's all over the board or you find yourself, binging TV or you find yourself staying up too late and then, being tired in the morning, really commit to that consistent bedtime. And if that bedtime is later, maybe start moving it up by 10 minutes. Maybe you do that every month. If you're going to bed at midnight, for example, and really you ideally would like to go to bed at 10, then move it up 10 minutes and just slowly progress. So, to wrap all of this up, your hormones respond to nourishment and safety, not pressure. If this episode supported you, please make sure to subscribe if you are watching on YouTube and hit that bell icon. Let me know in the comments what stood out for you. I'm very curious what resonated with you. And if you're listening on your favorite podcast platform, make sure you follow the show so that each new episode is waiting for you. I'm truly grateful that you are here, and I'm honored to have this time with you. And as always, have faith and take action.